Thank you guys so much for joining Breakout A1 Introduction to Sources of Strength. Here's a little bit about our speaker. As the Chief Strategy Officer at the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation, Daniel Bennett supports the ongoing growth and development of Ohio's network of suicide prevention coalitions while working on the Ohio Coalition Institute and the Lifeside Ohio campaign. Daniel also works on advocacy and legislative issues, organizing OSPF's partners to help advocate for suicide prevention. He's an Ohio certified prevention consultant, having worked previously in coalition work in universal school-based suicide prevention, including signs of suicide and sources of strength. Daniel has a Bachelor of Education degree from the University of Akron, and when he's not at work or coaching baseball, his free time is dedicated to the outdoors. Daniel, thank you so much for presenting today. I'll go ahead and get your slides ready.
Thank you, Evie, and good morning to everybody. Approaching on good afternoon here. While Evie gets those loaded up, she just read my bio that I hate when people read. No one really needs to know any of those things about me. But I will share that my experience around sources, I've been engaged in the program in a couple different ways over the years. I have served as a local trainer where I've gone out and helped schools to implement sources and gotten their students and peer leaders prepared to do the secondary curriculum. And we'll talk about all that here in a few minutes. And I've also served as an adult advisor for the curriculum. So I've actually gone into the schools and helped the youth kind of implement sources on the local level. So I do have a little bit of background and experience with the secondary curriculum, especially. And as we go through the presentation today, if you've got questions between myself and more importantly, Evie, we'll be able to answer those for you. So please feel comfortable sticking those in the chat. I'm also going to ask for a couple times for folks to stick some additional information in the chat, kind of answer some questions. So appreciate people participating in that. A little bit of our agenda for today. So we're going to take a look at the sources model and what kind of goes into the two curriculums. We will talk towards the end a little bit about funding and support and what's available here in the state of Ohio. And then we'll take that final look at what it looks like to join the Sources Network for Sources Ohio and become part of what is happening with sources around the state, but also what is happening kind of a little bit at the national level and how we kind of all connect here. All right, so what is sources of strength? I know this is kind of an introduction presentation, so we'll kind of take a look at what source of strength is. It is a suicide prevention and wellness program. It does exist for all the way from kindergarten up through grade 12. And it is what we call upstream prevention. And when we talk about upstream prevention, again, we're going to get into this a lot on some future slides. But I think traditionally, when we think of suicide prevention, we're thinking of kind of downstream or gatekeeper prevention. We're looking for somebody that's already exhibiting some warning signs or some symptoms for suicide. We're getting them some help. And through sources, we're really going upstream. So we're trying to look at the factors that may lead to suicide or suicidal behavior in youth, and we're trying to prevent them from progressing to that level. When we talk about sources, it is designed to reduce suicide, but it has a lot of other positive impacts within a school building, in a community, and a climate. It does reduce risk for suicide, and we'll talk about some of the data and the studies on that. But it's also been shown to reduce instances of bullying within a school. It's been shown to reduce violence within schools, to improve the overall mental health climate, and reduce incidence of mental illness as well. So there are a lot of really great things that come out of this program outside of just what we think of with it being a suicide prevention program. We are going to focus pretty heavily today on schools, but I do want to point out that sources is appropriate for both the school setting and what we would consider a community setting. If you do have questions about implementing it in the community setting, please stick those in the chat or reach out to Evie or myself and we can answer some of those. But some examples of something like that could be I've seen it run in Summit County where I'm from at the YMCA's during their summer camps. I've seen it used with like boys and girls clubs and after school programming. So there are some ways that we can implement sources outside of the school. But again, we're going to kind of primarily focus on what it looks like in the school setting. There are two programs when we talk about source of strength, and we'll kind of collectively just refer to them as sources, but we'll outline the two. We've got the original, which is the secondary program, and that's designed for grades 6 through 12. It's a middle school slash high school model, and it is youth led. So the youth are really kind of driving a lot of the work here. And when we talk about sources secondary, we're taking some connected adult advisors, we're taking a diverse group of peer leaders, and we're combining their work to make change within their building. And one of the really great things about Source of Strength, not only does it reduce risk for suicide, and has all those great benefits we talked about, but it's also House Bill 123 or the Safe Students Act approved. So here in the state of Ohio, if you're implementing sources and you're checking off some of those boxes within the program, you're actually meeting your requirements for both suicide prevention and violence prevention under the Safe Students Act. So an added benefit for the school district that they're meeting one of those mandates that are happening within their communities. We also have the elementary program, which is designed for kindergarten through sixth grade. This one is a little bit more what we think of like a traditional classroom-based instruction style curriculum. There is some staff wellness components built into it. It is coach-led, and towards the back end of the conversation today, we're going to take a look at what all that means. But just want to focus right now that there's the secondary program, which is for grades 6 through 12, and then the elementary program, which is available for kindergarten through sixth grade. One important thing to touch base on too, we probably noticed on the last slide, there's a little bit of overlap there with sixth grade. We've got a lot of flexibility in this space. You can actually use either program if you're working with a sixth grade audience. Um, Generally, a school tends to kind of default to whichever building their sixth graders are housed in. I live in the city of Barberton, and my son's middle school is a sixth through eighth grade building. So if they're implementing sources of strength, they're going to be using probably that secondary model because that's the one that's going to benefit all the grades that are within that building. If you're in a different district and maybe you've got an elementary and an intermediate building and it goes up to like sixth grade, then you may be using the elementary curriculum because then you're kind of connecting it with the other students within the district. If you're potentially in a maybe like a big community learning center and you've got a K through 12 building, it may just depend on what your adult advisors and your adults working with those youth prefer as far as which curriculum to use. So a lot of flexibility there with the sixth grade. Just again, it's kind of just the preference and what works best for that district. Now, we might wonder why is the program called Sources of Strength? And if you've not seen this before, this is what we call the sources wheel, or it's got our wheel of strengths on it. And these eight distinct strengths that a youth might have are actually eight different protective factors that reduce risk for youth suicide. They're kind of broken up. We've got people first, family, friends, and mentors that might reduce our risk for suicide. Then we have some of the places and the things around us, healthy activities, generosity, spirituality. We'll go into those as well that may impact and positively for youth. And then we got physical and mental health, and we'll talk about those two kind of separately. The one on the left there, that secondary wheel, that's what you're going to see if you're using the secondary curriculum. And the one on the right is an example we would see with the elementary curriculum. You can see that that one's a little bit more developmentally appropriate for younger youth, where it's got some pictures to help them understand when we talk about what some of these strengths are. Now, we're going to start by just kind of going through the different strengths on the wheel and kind of outlining what these look like. And our first one here is our family supports. And when we think about family supports, I know for myself, the first thing that comes to my mind are two people. My mom, who's always been a huge supporter and a strength for me. And then I also think about my wife, who my wife's my best friend, somebody I can turn to when things aren't going well, whether it's my personal life, my work life, I'm just really stressed. She's always somebody I can turn to. And for a lot of people, when we think about family supports, we're going to go to somebody in our biological family that fits that need for us. But when we think about family supports and sources, this could also be someone from our chosen family. Not all of the youth that are going to engage in our programming have strong connections with biological family, or may not even be living with their biological family, but they may be able to identify some chosen family that are a strong family support for them. Maybe you've got somebody that you've always called your aunt that's actually like your mom's best friend. Or maybe you're really close with a friend, so much so that they're more like a cousin than they are just like a family friend or something like that. So as we think about family supports, youth could turn to biological family, but it could also be that chosen family as well. Next on the wheel, we've got positive friends. I really want to emphasize that word positive there. That's a huge piece of this. We all have friends in our lives that if you're going to spend some time with them, there's a good chance you're going to get yourself into a little bit of trouble. Maybe you're going to stay out too late. Maybe they're the kind of friend that you don't always make the best choices with. And when we want to emphasize the strengths that youth have, we're trying to stay away from conversations about those friends that sometimes get us in a little bit of trouble. We would much rather direct this conversation to discuss those positive friends, the people in our lives that we know are always going to have our back and help us through troubling times. And I would invite everybody in the chat, go ahead and write down one characteristic that you think makes somebody a positive friend. And then go ahead and enter that in the chat. We're going to take a look at some of the things that we might identify as somebody who's positive. Okay, honest, a great listener, they're trustworthy, yeah, they've got good intentions. They encourage us. They're dependable. I've seen trust a couple times, good listeners. Yeah. So we can think of some of those things that within our friend group, we know are going to be an option for being a positive friend there for us. Non-judgmental. Yeah, that's a big one. They encourage us. Sure. Yep. Excellent answers. We want to encourage you to be able to identify those positive characteristics as well. Next on the wheel, we've got our mentors. And our mentors, that's where we're going to see our trusted adults fit in to the category. A mentor is someone who is either older than us or someone who is more experienced than us that we can turn to kind of guide us through maybe some difficult situations or kind of help us out when we might be struggling. Now, a lot of the time when we think of mentors, especially of adults, we probably think of somebody who's come before us, and a lot of times that person might be a little bit older. Maybe it's somebody in your career that's guided you and kind of helped you, showed you the way that, to do the work that we're doing. But sometimes a mentor may just be somebody who's got more experience than us. And when we think of our youth, it could be somebody that, like if they're in the band, that's played an instrument longer than they have, even if they're a grade younger. Or it could be somebody who's played a sport longer. And so they've got a little bit more experience and they can kind of guide them through that. So our mentors generally are going to be somebody older than us, our trusted adults, but they don't always have to be somebody that's older than us in that space. Next, we've got our healthy activities. And when we talk about healthy activities, a lot of times we're going to think about things that help us to cope in a positive way, activities that may connect us to other people, that help us build our skills, and I think also things that help us take a break from stress. And for me, Evie mentioned it in my bio. I love to be in the outdoors. I love to go hunting or fishing or just take walks. It is late April, early May season, so I am out looking for wild mushrooms this time of the year. Like any excuse I can have to be out in nature, that's a healthy activity. I'm out walking and getting some exercise and some fresh air. Evie loves to bake. She brings us in baked goods at work all the time. Her and another one of her coworkers are always kind of bringing us in stuff, and I know that's a good healthy activity for her as she kind of de-stresses. I would encourage you in the chat to kind of put in some activities that you might turn to after today, because I know we're going to be on screens for a long time. What are some things you might turn to after today's conference that could be a good healthy activity as we kind of transition out of our conversation on sources later today? Okay. Artwork, running, crafts, walking, camping. Yeah, music's a huge one. The outside. Kids say music a lot as well. We get that one with the youth. Being in nature, I see gardening again. Yeah, so a lot of great answers in here. Walking. I've already been in this chair for way too long today, so I'm looking for the opportunity to get out of this. If the rain holds off, we're supposed to have a baseball game tonight. So hopefully we'll be able to get out and coach and my kids can play tonight. Next on the wheel, we've got generosity. And I think generosity is one of the pieces of the wheel that I don't think people always think of right away when they think about suicide prevention. But one of the things we know from research around suicide is that a lot of times people who feel suicidal feel maybe hopeless or they feel like a burden, like just existing is making their family and friends' lives worse, that they're harming the people they care about because of what they're going through. And generosity can kind of help us to reframe that. When we give an individual an opportunity to be generous, it gives them an opportunity to kind of self-reflect that they're doing something positive, that they're giving back to the community, that they're having a positive impact on the people around themselves. Um, if you've ever had this experience, like if somebody gives you something or somebody's generous towards you, that feels good, like somebody cared enough to see that I needed this and wanted to help out. But if you've ever had the opportunity to donate your time, donate some money, donate your expertise, maybe you've worked at the food bank and handed out food for the day to folks who are struggling, like you end up feeling better about yourself after you've done that activity, even though nobody gave you anything for it. You devoted your time and your energy to helping out. And that's how generosity can really strengthen us as we talk about suicide prevention. It does also feel great when someone's generous towards us, but when we can be generous towards other people, that can help us kind of really feel strong in this space as well. And that combats some of those feelings of maybe feeling like you're a burden or that you feel kind of hopeless in this space. What is something kind of big or small over the next week that you could be generous in? How could you be generous towards other people? Or if you want to share an example of sometimes somebody was really generous towards you in the chat, that would be awesome to share as well. Praying for others, sure. Time with family, giving people grace. Yeah, I know I get frustrated sometimes. And again, I mentioned we got a baseball game tonight. I'm always trying to give umpires grace because I know they can't always see what's happening on the field. Just sitting and being with other people, sure. Making dinner for a friend. Yeah, mentoring, tutoring children, being present. Yeah, sometimes just being present for people is huge. Yep. Picking up and delivering food bags for the students. Absolutely. Next on the list, we've got spirituality. And I think a lot of times when I say spirituality, our first thought is faith. And I know under generosity, we mentioned things like praying for people. And spirituality could certainly be whatever faith community is that an individual feels connected to. But really, when Sources talks about spirituality, they just want to open us up to the opportunity to feel connected to something that's larger than yourself. So, in my example, I've already mentioned going out and being in nature. Sometimes just taking a hike and just kind of breathing in that fresh air and getting away from electronics and all the noise can be spiritually refreshing for people. Again, it could be faith, but it's really any way that you could feel yourself connected to some sort of higher power, whether it's nature, things like that. Another thing we see with spirituality, there's some studies that have been shown that if every day for a period of time, 30 days or more, I write down in a journal something I'm grateful for, that can actually change my mentality and I start to see gratitude more than I start to see the negativity that may be happening around me. And when we think about our youth, especially today, they're hearing a lot of negative things around them. If especially like our older youth, we think about like graduating and the job market and what are you going to do with your lives. I've got a junior right now in my house who's trying to figure out where she's going to go to school and stressed about all these things that she's thinking about. But taking that time to write down some things we're grateful for, we can reset that mindset. We can start to see that we're largely connected and that things aren't always the negativity that we're seeing in maybe the news or being described around us. Again, in the chat, go ahead and throw in something you're feeling grateful for right now. I will say for sure, family and friends, and then I'm really grateful Evie's running the slideshow for me right now, so I don't have to worry about that. Health, friends, family. Excellent. Yep, health again. Yeah, a lot of people saying friends and family and health. Yeah, having a good job. Yep, the rain, springtime. Yeah, opportunities here. Sure. Next one on the wheel, we're going to get into kind of our last two here, physical and mental health. And these ones are a little kind of separate from the others. Physical health is all the ways that our physical health impacts our mental health. So we might think of our physical health as being things that overlap with like healthy activities, playing sports and things like that. That can be part of our physical health. We might go right away to thinking about like, are we free of illness? Are we getting enough water? Are we sleeping enough? Those kind of things go into our physical health. But it really could be anything that's going to help us on a physical side to feel better mentally. And things like getting enough water and getting enough sleep do improve our mental health. What are some ways, go ahead and list them again in the chat, that you practice physical health activities, ways that you're going to connect here uh, with your physical health that aligns with your mental health? Walking the dogs. Yeah, getting up from our desk once an hour is a huge one. Yep. Getting plenty of sleep, standing desk. Yeah. Lots of exercise and sleep in here. Perfect. And then we've got our last strength here, our last protective factor, and that's our mental health. And mental health, I think a lot of us probably think about around suicide prevention, 988, the crisis hotline, counseling and medication, some of the traditional ways we think about treating mental health issues or how we might think about stepping in if an individual's in crisis. And those are an important piece of our mental health. But I also want us to think about things like breathing exercises and strengthening our areas around the other parts of the wheel that can improve our mental health. I've got a couple family members that experience some high anxiety from time to time, and grounding techniques and breathing exercises have been a huge way for them to kind of manage some of that stress, come out of some of that anxiety, and kind of re-level set. So that's a great way that we can kind of take a look at how we can control our mental health here. And when we think about mental health, it's not always just, hey, do I have a mental illness that's diagnosable, or is everything going well? There's kind of a stages in between that. We could be really stressed out and not have a mental illness. So how do we reduce some of that stress? How do we bring our mental health up when we may be struggling? And we can turn to some of these other strengths as we do that. So those are yeah, definitely working on the other parts of the wheel are a big piece of this. Those are the eight core strengths that go into sources. We're going to talk about how we kind of use those as we go through um, the program. Now, in a second here, I'm going to tell you kind of a common prevention story, the parable of the river. Some of us may have heard this already, but I want to point out that as we've been talking about sources here, I haven't talked about suicide screenings. I haven't talked about risk factors really. We haven't talked about warning signs for suicide. And that's kind of on purpose as we talk about sources because we are so focused on those protective factors and we're so focused on this concept of working upstream in suicide prevention. And the river parable is going to kind of illustrate that for us. So I want you to kind of imagine, and we've got the graphic here on the screen, so it makes it a little easier. I want you to imagine that there's like this beautiful, quaint mountain town, and it's along the side of a river, and we've got a waterfall here. And every morning there's a lady, she gets up and she takes her dog for a walk, and she walks up and down the river from town to the waterfall and back. And every day when she takes her walk, she starts to notice people who are in the river, who are in crisis. They're at risk for going over the waterfall. And so, first time this happens, she dives in, she gets the person, she pulls them to safety, she saves that person's life. And everybody in town is like so thankful she was there that day because she made such a huge difference for this person who was struggling and who was at risk of going over the waterfall. Well, the next day she goes to take her walk again, and the same thing happens. And so she goes back to town and she gets this person help and she goes back to town and she says, we got to get watchtowers up. We've got to get lifeguards stationed. We need to be doing more to pull people out of the river. And so the town mobilizes and they get all these resources set up and they're able to pull people out of the river. But as time continues, more and more people are falling into the river. And it gets to a point where even though they've got these lifeguard towers and they've got people willing to jump in and help out, there's not enough resources to pull everyone from the river. And eventually someone ends up going over the waterfall. So one morning she's walking down to the water edge and she sees all these people in the water. And instead of walking downstream towards the waterfall where she can jump in and save people, she walks upstream away from where people are at highest risk of going over. And the town is saying, where are you going? It's all hands on deck. We need you here to help save people. And she says, I am going to help save people. I'm going to go upriver and I'm going to find out why people are falling in the water in the first place so I can try to prevent it. And that's what we do with sources of strength. We're looking for the reasons why people might fall into the river in the first place. It might be that they lack these protective factors, these strengths. We're going to enhance those strengths. We're going to build them up in the community, and then we can prevent people from falling in the river in the first place. And the more people we prevent from falling in the river, the less likelihood it is that someone's going to end up going over the waterfall in the future. Now, as I mentioned, sources is really that upstream prevention. So our primary mission is to build protective factors in folks to keep them from falling into the river in the first place. And if someone does fall in the river in the future, there's less people in the river, so it takes less resources to support them. We're more likely to be able to catch that person and get them the help that they need. So by being able, with our primary mission to build those protective factors, we're going to need less resources to support intervention in the future. Then we've got some secondary benefits here with sources. Peer leaders within the program are 4 times more likely than the average student to refer one of their peers to a trusted adult if they are in crisis. So in the intervention space, our peer leaders are actually getting help for their friends more often than we see when there's a school or a community that's not implementing sources. And then we also see sources benefit here in the postvention space. If you're not familiar with postvention, that's the activities or the resources or supports that go into a community or a school after a suicide has happened. When we talk about our peer leaders, they are on the lookout for those who might be most impacted by that suicide loss, and they're going to refer them to help, like we saw in the last slide. And it's not always the kids that we think are going to be impacted. It's not always just the kids who are close with that youth that's passed away. That death can impact anyone within the building, and the peer leaders are going to be more likely to spot those warning signs and direct them to adults than even the adults are going to see it. And it also sources encourages us to practice those healthy coping skills and lean on our strengths. So when we are going through that troubling time like postvention situation, we have those strengths to rely back on. Quick history on sources. So I didn't mention this earlier, but sources has been here in Ohio since about 2020. But the program has existed in some form since about 1998, and it started with that secondary program. That's the one that's been around the longest. And since it was started in 1998, it's been implemented in almost every state here in the United States. It's also been implemented in parts of Canada and also in Australia. So when we talk about sources, it has actually been proven in a number of different locations, and it is an international program at this point. And Sources does something really cool that it kind of bridges the gaps in what we see in a lot of our traditional suicide prevention programming. When we talk about most suicide prevention programming, what we're talking about is a gatekeeper program where we're spotting somebody who's at risk and we're getting them connected to a resource when they're already potentially struggling or at heightened risk for suicide. They're already showing probably warning signs. And our traditional suicide prevention programs are very risk focused as a result. Sources, like we mentioned, we're not talking about those risk factors a lot of times. We're more strength focused. We're looking at the protective factors that prevent us from reaching that risk phase in the first place. The reason that we focus on the strengths, if you walk into pretty much any high school or middle school in Ohio and you ask them what's a warning sign that somebody's depressed, sad, suicidal, they're going to be able to give you the warning signs. But if we ask them to identify what's a sign that somebody is doing better, how do we know that somebody's recovering from a mental health concern? That's one that they struggle a little bit more with. So we try to focus on building up those strengths because it's a piece that they're not maybe as familiar with already. The next space that Sources steps into is all of our messaging is going to be hope, help, and strength focused. And the research shows us that a lot of our suicide prevention messaging, it tends to be sad, shock, trauma messaging, and that creates this false narrative that suicide behavior in youth is common. The truth is, I'm sure most of us have heard the statistic that suicide in any given year is the second or third or first leading cause of death in youth. Well, that's because a lot of other things don't cause youth to die. Like youth aren't dying from heart disease and cancer the way that adults are. So the statistic sounds like really impactful and impressive when we say that, but the truth is youth suicide is really rare. It's not happening in a lot of cases. So we want our messaging to be hope focused and help focused because we want people to be comfortable stepping out and getting that help. We don't want to build kind of this trauma messaging that reinforces something that's honestly not true and makes kids maybe more likely to turn to suicide because they think it's the norm. And then with a lot of traditional suicide prevention messaging, it's adult driven. Sources is peer led. And the reason that we see that model used in Sources of Strength is because youth tend to take their cues and how they interact and their norms from their peers. We can be great models and we can impact youth behavior in a lot of great ways, but the truth is, like, when it comes to adults, they're much more likely to listen to their classmates than they are to listen to us when it comes to messaging around like substance use, um, dating, depression, anxiety, like all these kind of things we think of that might negatively impact youth. So we really want to make sure that this message is coming from peers, but we also want to make sure that it's guided by adults so that we're getting the youth appropriate messaging, but then again, it's going to be well received because it's coming from their peers. Here's what kind of an overview of the secondary program looks like. So we've got our community of strength. We want this to be diverse and inclusive and collaborative. That's a hard word to say, Evie. Collaborative. We have our adult advisors. They're an important aspect of this. These people should be caring, connected, and positive, but they're just there to help guide the programming in a safe way, where the youth are going to be the influential individuals who are actually getting this messaging out to their peers. That community of strength creates strategic messaging campaigns. These have to be engaging, interactive, and they have to apply to the school that or the environment that they're being used in. And that can lead to positive cultural change or positive social norms within the building. We're going to break down what these look like. So first, we've got our adult advisors, and as I mentioned, I served in this role at a couple different schools in my prior job where I was doing some school-based suicide prevention. We want our adult advisors to be caring, like they genuinely should care about young people. They shouldn't be there just because they're getting like a stipend to do the program or things like that. These should be people who actually care about the youth. And generally, we're going to see that in the school setting, but we do want to make sure that these
Hello.
people care there. We want to make sure they're connected too. They have to be youth that have a or they have to be adults that have a natural ability to build relationships with young
What's up?
people. And then we want them to be positive. So they have to generally have a positive attitude towards youth and believe that youth can make change in their school. If the adults aren't invested, the youth aren't going to be invested either. You don't have to be a mental health expert to be involved as an adult advisor. Because Sources is so focused on those strengths, we're so focused on that upstream approach to suicide prevention. All you need to do is have the three components we just listed, be willing to volunteer, and we'll give you a little bit of training on like some of the warning signs and symptoms if you need it, but you don't have to have any base knowledge on mental health beyond that. And then how many adult advisors do we need? We get that question a lot. For every 7 to 10 youth that are participating in the program, you're going to want one adult advisor. So that can include your school's counselor or the social worker, but it doesn't always have to. I've seen schools be very successful where the school counselor is involved, and I've seen schools be really successful where the school counselor is just a resource, and it's maybe teachers or aides or the principal, the secretary that are kind of leading this work on the adult side. Then we've got our peer leaders. We want these people to be influential and have insight within their school. And it's fine to get some of those traditional, like high achieving students. You might have like maybe like the prom queen or like the football captain, like those people are great, but they're not going to be able to reach everybody within their school. So it's important that we get kind of a cross section of what's happening in our school. Make sure we're representing all the demographic groups that exist there. Do we have some of the preps and the jocks and the nerds and the troublemakers? When I was in high school, I was in that troublemaker group. I did just enough to get by. I was not super interested in um, grades, and I kind of bounced around from social groups. Having kids like that as part of your peer leader team is huge because they're able to connect with a lot of different groups and they're going to be able to disseminate your messaging to all the different pockets of your school. How many peer leaders do we need? Sources recommends recruiting about 6 to 10% of your student body as peer leaders. So if you've got a school with 200 students, you're probably going to have 20 youth participating. If you've got a school of 1,000 students, do you have to have 60 to 100 students participating? Not necessarily. We can make some adaptations for larger schools. And I've even seen where sometimes the sources group will break into groups that are doing different projects within the campaign. And so they may be meeting individually with one or two adult leaders. So long as we've got a good cross section of the school and we've got an adult for every roughly 10 kids, we're going to be pretty good to move forward within the district and make the secondary program work. Then we've got our campaigns. So we want our campaigns to be strategic messaging campaigns. Again, I mentioned they should be engaging, they should be interactive. I'm sure all of us have probably seen it sometime in our life, that poster of a kitten who's hanging on to a string and it just says hang in there. And it's been in every classroom since 1953. Sure, maybe that's inspiring to somebody. But if you're struggling with a mental health concern or you're feeling depressed or suicidal, that kitten poster is not doing anything for you. We really want our messaging to be interactive, engaging. So the youth and the adults are going to meet once or twice a month. They're going to plan out some of these strategic messaging. This goes into the larger campaign. And a campaign is just a sequence of themed prevention activities. So over time, when we implement these campaigns, we're able to change the school climate and culture, and we're going to turn people towards healthy behaviors and make those the norm as opposed to the goal. So the longer we have this up and running, the more we start to work sources towards a positive social norm within the building. We've got an example of a campaign here. This is a trusted adult campaign, a pretty common one that schools do. And this would fit with that mentor section of the wheel. We want youth to be able to identify someone they can turn to. If you can identify a trusted adult when everything's going well, you're more likely to turn to that trusted adult when there's a crisis for yourself or a friend. So some examples here. You could give a presentation on trusted adults to the staff. And then the staff who are willing to act as trusted adults, they could put up posters within their classroom. We could survey the students on who they identify as trusted adults, and then you can see doing a door decorating contest to recognize those popular trusted adults within the building. We really want to normalize that idea that we can turn towards these trusted adults. And there may be students in the building who can't identify a trusted adult, but if somebody's been vetted by their peers, they may be more likely to turn to that person, even if they haven't developed a relationship with them yet. Another part of that campaign could be having the students fill out some index cards or some post-it notes, creating a paper chain that identifies all of these different trusted adults, and then creating some sort of collage or imagery within the building where the youth are providing their own voices there by identifying who they see as a trusted adult and creating that artwork there. One of the schools I did sources in had kind of a central pillar in their building. They created that with construction paper to look like a tree. They invited their peers to identify trusted adults. They wrote those names on fruit, and they had this tree with all these names hanging from it of trusted adults. That was a 3D display of all the great people in the building they could turn to. Some schools have done like a Mentors Madness bracket, similar like a March Madness bracket. You could nominate a trusted adult and have some kind of fun contest for whoever gets the most nominations, like a pie to the face during a pep rally. And again, our campaigns are going to create change over time. This isn't going to be like an instant change within the climate of the building, but we will see this affect those positive norms moving forward. Now, I know saying, we're going to create these campaigns, like, how does that actually change the school climate? Like, is this really having a positive outcome? Well, we can see with all of these different examples of universities and the CDC that have done studies on sources, the National Institute of Mental Health, they found that sources has some really great positive impacts within the building. Sources is actually the most rigorously evaluated prevention program in North America. It's had 8 peer-reviewed studies that have demonstrated its effectiveness, and we can see those kind of listed here. One example in a cluster randomized control trial, 18 schools in 2010 went through this trial. That included 465 peer leaders and 2,700 students, and they saw some really major changes here. I want to really highlight, though, that again, youth were 4 times as likely to refer to peers, and we saw the largest gains with those least connected and least healthy peer leaders. Same thing in the general population. The largest gains were for those with a history of suicide attempts. Some really powerful stuff happening there on the youth side with the programming. Another control trial, they saw a reduction in suicide attempts by 29%, and that was comparative across diverse demographics. One of the things we see with a lot of suicide programming is it's been tested and evaluated with 1 or 2 demographics, but we don't see the same effect across all demographics. To see this impact with sources across all demographics is huge. All right, so we'll take a look now at the elementary programming. The elementary started in 2020 with a universal curriculum that was created for grades 3 through 6. So as you can see, 2020 versus 1998, the elementary curriculum's quite a bit newer. And a couple years after that, they came out with some programming for grades K through 2. And then in 2025, they came out with individual grade level work for grades 3 through 5. So there's individual curriculum for each grade K through 5, and then that universal curriculum exists that can be used for grade 6. Like we said, grade 6 can also use the secondary program as well. The curriculum are based again on those 8 sources of strength. Each lesson also focuses on one of 5 skills that include things like self-management, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And the schools have a lot of options here. They can implement the curriculum across the board. They can just pick a couple grades that they would like to use it in, or they can use it in some of those older grades before they start to move them up into the middle school and high school level, where they may participate in the secondary curriculum. We see this also has a staff component into it as well that we'll talk about. But there's an opportunity to reflect on staff wellness as part of the elementary curriculum as well. We've seen the universal curriculum used in middle schools across Ohio with students who have some social, emotional development that's been impacted negatively by the pandemic. We've also seen the universal curriculum support students with developmental delays as well. So again, these curriculums have an impact on all demographics within the building. And I mentioned there's that staff wellness piece. It's important that we are educated on the materials ourselves. We want to model this behavior when we're teaching it, which is important. We also want to give staff the opportunity to build up their own strengths. The elementary program is really going to improve staff well-being as well. So it is important to include adults in that as we go through. So for the curriculum themselves, each one has unique content, but a lot of features carry over. So those core concepts and the 8 strengths, you're going to see those throughout K all the way to 12. They'll build upon each other a little bit with unique lessons. So students aren't repeating things over and over again from year to year. It's designed to be implemented in 20 to 30-minute lessons. You can do them once or twice a week and work through the entire curriculum across the school year. When we talk about suicide prevention for elementary schoolers, that can sometimes seem like um, I think sometimes a strange concept, but again, with sources, we're not talking directly about suicide. We're building up those protective factors. And the elementary program, it reaches students where they are. It's developmentally appropriate. What's going to be built in for the kindergarten curriculum is going to be approached in a different way than what we're going to see in the fourth or fifth grade curriculum, because it is really set to meet them at their different emotional and developmental levels. But we still have the same foundation, so it makes it really easy as they go through the curriculum to identify the feelings they're experiencing, to identify the strengths they have, and then we can start to self-regulate and take care of ourselves as we age through the program. The elementary program can help us out when we're in crisis and help us kind of recognize when we need help and how we can go and get that help from a trusted adult. For each lesson, if anybody's ever been in the classroom space before, I've taught before, there are notes, there's instructions, there's a script for you. If reading a script isn't your thing, you don't have to. You can make some adjustments to it. You can use your own voice, but it's there for you, especially if you're new with the lessons and you need that support through it. There's a lot of components within it with the curricula for each lesson. So you've got a lesson spotlight, which gives you kind of what it is you're going to be focused on. There's material sections, preparation. So you're not going to step into the elementary curriculum and feel like you don't know what you're doing. Everything's kind of outlined, laid out for you within uh, the guide. There's going to be activities built into it. We didn't really talk about this with the secondary program, but there's a lot of activities and games built into Sources of Strength. It is meant to be a fun experience for kids. Again, we're staying away from that sad shock trauma messaging, and so that does get built in to everything we're doing. There's group discussions, pair sharing. There are storytelling within the lessons, so it is very engaging and interacting for the youth. Another great thing within the curriculum is there's accommodations. So as we said, there's a lot of games. There will be accommodations. So if you've got a youth with a physical disability, if there's some cultural differences, even if you just have to adjust the lesson because of time constraints, that's built in. And if you need to make an adaptation that's not listed, you can reach out to sources and they can help you create an additional accommodation for your students. So we've got two roles for adults within the elementary program. There's going to be coaches and instructors. Coaches are the people who coordinate, including the staff wellness and onboarding instructors. Instructors are the ones who are actually teaching and leading those lessons within the classroom. Sometimes those people are the same, especially when you first get started, but then you may start to train instructors in the building as you move forward. You've got a lot of flexibility within this. That staff piece, although we highly recommend it, can be optional. And as I said, coaches can start off as instructors and then pass it on to classroom teachers once they're more comfortable with the curriculum in the future. We do see greater outcomes when we do include the staff wellness piece. So if we include that, again, if we're prioritizing our own mental health, then we're modeling that for youth and they're likely to do the same. If the classroom teachers really embrace the curriculum, if they're adding like the source of strength into other lessons, we're kind of layering the messaging, that's going to increase it as well. And then if the coaches have a strong relationship. So as I mentioned, I used to do the secondary curriculum. I was an outside person from a mental health agency, and you can use that as a coach if they're connected well. But if that person isn't strongly connected with the teachers in the building, then they may not be the best choice for a coach because they don't necessarily have the sway to get teacher buy-in to make the program work well. Each school should have a minimum of one coach, but we do recommend two just because it gives you some sustainability if someone were to leave the district or somebody's sick. We've got someone who could still go in and do those lessons. Um, as I mentioned, the elementary curriculum is a lot newer, so it's not as well tested as the secondary curriculum, but we are starting to see some positives here. It was recently added to the Suicide Prevention Resource Center's best practice registry. The University of Oregon's Suicide Research Center found that 92% of sources coaches reported that students were actively applying their learning to real life situations. So it's going beyond just what you're talking about in that 20-minute lesson. It's actually being implemented. And they saw increases in things like utilizing our strengths, coping in a healthy way, improve school climate, co-regulation there, and then some added benefits, as we mentioned, for our adults, and then also the relationship between our adults and our youth improving in the building as well. Mention too that our source of strength team that includes us with OSPF and chiefly Evie. She is a rock star in this space. We also partner with Prevention First on this, and we are funded very heavily through the Ohio Department of Behavioral Health through sources. So we are so thankful for their continued partnership on this as well. I won't spend a ton of time on the slide because I want to get to the next ones, but I just want to say since Sources has been up and running in December of 2020, 12% of all Ohio school students have received Sources of Strength in their schools. That's 205,000 students and counting as we move forward between the middle and or between the secondary and the elementary curriculum. All right, here's what probably a lot of us have questions on. What is the funding piece for this? So for the secondary curriculum, there is an annual licensing fee. It is $750. Evie, I believe that is per building. So if my high school has two high schools, I need two, right? Yep, you're nodding yes. Perfect. There's also an annual adult advisor training. It's really recommended for high schools that they do it for the first 3 years for sure. And then for middle schools, career centers, that it's something we're hosting annually. You can do it annually. It can change. It adapts from year to year. As your peer leaders build within the program and your adult advisors, you can get more in depth into um, the curriculum and some of the activities you're going to run, but we would recommend at least the first 3 years that we're doing it. As far as funding goes, for the next school year, licensing fees are covered for all schools in Ohio. Training costs are going to be covered through August 30th of 2026, so the August coming up. So speak to Evie, her email's there if you're interested in getting trained between now and August 30th. I have no idea what her capacity is, but she'll be able to answer those questions for you. There's also no cost trainings confirmed for Franklin and Huron counties. And some schools may have their own local trainers that can do that for them. And sometimes there are outside agencies that can help with that as well. And there's a possibility training costs may be covered for other schools. Past that date, it's just going to depend on state funding, and we won't know what that looks like until the next state fiscal year starts. But I would still encourage you, even if we don't have a training or a funding option listed there, Evie may know of some options. Definitely reach out to her and get connected. Then we've got the cost for the elementary curriculum. To get a coach trained, it is $1,250. They go through a virtual training with that, so you don't have to send them anywhere. They don't have to go around the country, no travel cost. And then the curriculum costs $750 per grade level. So if you are going to do K through 6, you are looking at, I got off that slide, sorry. You're looking at, Evie, what's the number? Never mind, $5,250 if you're going to do all grade levels. But I will point out for the elementary curriculum, this isn't a recurring cost. It's not like the secondary where you have to pay for it every year. You're paying for the curriculum one time for that grade level and you have access to it. So it's not kind of an ongoing cost like we see with the secondary program. Now, there's not currently any funding in Ohio for the elementary program, but again, that could change as we move forward. So if funding is an issue, reach out to Evie. She can answer some questions for that. And if a school does lose a coach and needs help getting somebody recertified, again, reach out to Evie. We can help identify funding sources for that as they come out for us. What the implementation looks like, I'm going to go through this real quick because I think we've got 2 minutes left. On the secondary level, you're going to submit a letter of commitment that just says, hey, I know what this program is. I'm going to do it to Fidelity. Your principal, superintendent, somebody who's a bigwig at your school signs that. We get it over to Evie and to sources, and that gets the ball rolling. You recruit your Adult advisors, you recruit your peer leaders. They are nominated by your staff within the building. They don't have to be adult advisors who are nominating them. We set up a training date. Adults are going to go for a 3.5 to 6 hour training. And then the peer leader training is usually the next day. It's 4.5 to 6 hours. Adults are going to be at both of those. Um, you're going to complete your licensing fee. You're going to get your materials sent to you. You will identify when you're going to have your meetings. You'll get the actual training. You can do a professional development for staff as well. If you are using this for House Bill 123, make sure you connect with your trainer on that piece of it. You hold your first meeting, and then you start to meet on a regular basis throughout the year to do those campaigns. Most campaigns last a couple weeks to a couple months. So a first time school is probably doing maybe 2 to 3 campaigns in a year, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on the students. If they're really engaged with it, there's no reason to move on to a new campaign until you see that it's, that they're kind of waning with it. And then with the elementary curriculum, kind of the structure here, you're going to identify the staff that are going to go to that virtual training. You're going to start planning who your instructors could be. We do the actual coaches training. We determine how we're going to roll it out. Some schools, hey, every fourth grader is getting it this year. Some schools are going to target a couple classrooms to pilot it. Order your curriculum, do your professional development for staff, hold your first coaches meeting. And you can do again some of that staff wellness and reflection as part of it. Uh, when you have your staff gatherings, lead some activities, and then you go start teaching the lessons to the students. If you've got questions, you can visit Sources of Strength Ohio. You can also reach out to the Sources Ohio at Prevention First, and then Evie. Both of them are great options to answer questions. And we have like 3 seconds left. So if you've got a question now, you can throw it in the chat, and Evie and I may be able to get to it.